A splendid afternoon, everyone. My talk this afternoon will be about human resource management intervention. I hope that you can sustain your certain degree of attention to the time allotted to me to expound regarding human resource management intervention. So we will define first what is human resource management. Before we deal with different interventions, we first know what is human resource management. According to Armstrong in 1997, human resource management can be defined as a strategic approach to acquiring, developing, managing, motivating, and gaining the commitment of the organization's key resource, and that's the people who work in and for it. Another definition being given by Edwin Filippo, he defines human resource management as planning, organizing, directing, controlling of procurement, development, compensation, integration, maintenance, and separation of human resources to the end that individual, organizational, and social objectives are achieved. According also to Dessler in 2008, the policies and practices involved in carrying out the people or human resource aspects of a management position, including recruiting, screening, training, rewarding, and appraising, comprises of human resource management. Human resource management is concerned with the most effective use of people to achieve organizational and individual goals. It is the way of managing people at work so that they give their best to the organization. That's from Invan, Civic, and Glue. Now we'll be talking about the 9 broad areas of activities of human resource management. According to American Society for Training and Development, there are 9 identified broad areas of activities. Number 1 is human resource planning, followed by organization and jobs design, selection and staffing, training and development, organizational development, compensation and benefits, employee assistance, union labor relations, and personal research and information system. Apparently, there are myriad of information that a human resource manager or people working in the human resource department should know, as it is being reflected from the 9 activities, broad activities, being mentioned by American Society for Training and Development. We will also be talking about, I'll just be sharing to you new trends in human resource management. So these are the selected new trends in human resource management: better communication channels, change in the work life. So as we all know, with the onset of technology, there are many platforms now in social media wherein communication to co-workers, to employees, will be via this online platforms. Change in the work life, as we all know as well, we are in the trying times, so there's a paradigm shift in terms of work scheduling. So there's apparently a change in work life. Job redesigning of jobs, job enlargement. So jobs that entails about technology, it's really as of this moment it's in need. I mean, there is big chance for students who graduate with so much idea about who are techie, who are skillful about technology, specifically computer technology. New approaches to compensation and rewards. In reward system, there are many approaches now. Like for example, the MICE meeting incentives. People will be given rewards through travel tours and packages. So that's also one thing that HR department is looking into and applying it now as of this time. Facilitating empowerment. So human resource management, people in the human resource management will do this, empowering people in the organization, even people from the undermost position, undermost level in the hierarchy. They are being empowered. I remember when I was still working with Radisson Blue in the Sultanate of Oman, we have the so-called, in Radisson, the guest service program, wherein all members of the staff are empowered to invoke the guarantee of 100% guest satisfaction. So if there are, for example, complaints being raised by guests or customers, there's no need for an ordinary service staff to call attention of the manager to solve the problem, to rectify the problem. But we are all being given the authority. We are being empowered to solve problems. Of course, with some exemptions like big problems that should be solved by the management. So initiating and facilitating process of change. Remember, change is the constant. It's the only constant in this precarious world. So human resource management should be very flexible. Also, should always adapt with what's new. As of this moment, we all know there is a clear and apparent paradigm shift in many systems, not only in education. Enlarging the knowledge base. Yes, this is really a trend apparently. People can now access information from the internet. And aside from that, we are all being enticed to become creator of different material, a content writer and so on. So that's a trend also in the human resource management. So a human resource manager should be able to entice also members of the organization to become creator in every department that they belong. Creator, for example, if in a department of budget, so people should strategize things to come up with a very good output. Okay, developing team spirit. So this is being underscored in many organizations, in many trainings, and even for members of the staff joining the company, teamwork, team activities. And this is not only during the first phase of the tenure of a particular employee, but this should be done annually, for example. Facilitating the employee's desires of self-actualization. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if possible, people in the organization will reach this at the peak of their success in their work, or else they have to look for another job from another company. Why study human resource management? So I have here just very three important important things to take heed. Why there's a dire need for us to study human resource management. We will learn important functions and concepts, and at the same time develop our ability to apply the human resource management functions through our critical thinking. Eventually acquire human resource management skills in our personal and professional lives. Human resource issues are emerging as some of the most prominent concerns for owners and managers. You probably heard buzzwords floating around about managers, and particularly I'm talking about human resource managers, needing to be more strategic, business focused, customer focused, and generally in time with the overall operational success of the organization. Think about it. What is happening in today's business environment that might be causing human resource managers to rethink their way of doing business? One of the primary items that is causing the process of rethinking management is that there is much greater competition within most industries today compared to 20 or 30 years ago. As a result, human resource managers as well as operational managers have been forced to think in more strategic terms about how their organization can win against their competitions by utilizing their human resources. Like in my case, I'm just new in my designation as a program head. in my university. So I joined strategic planning workshops, shops this year, and I've heard there are more strategic meetings and plannings that will be held in school. So especially nowadays, that the competition is really stiff. One simple fact is that in the 21st century organization, human resources, we're talking here about the people within the organization, are one of the primary means of creating a competitive advantage for the organization because management of human resources affects performance. I suppose this is agreeable in your part. Why is this so? It is simply because most organizations of comparable size and scope within the same industry generally have access to the same material and facilities-based resources. This is being the case. It's very difficult to create a competitive advantage based on material, facility, or other tangible or economic resources. What this leaves is people. If the organization can manage its people more successfully than its competitors can, if it can get employees involved in the day-to-day success of the organization, it has much greater chance of being successful, with the term successful defined as being more productive and more profitable than the competition. Managers are responsible for getting the job done through employees, so the organization's human resources are its most valuable resource. Allow me to share my experiences. I can still vividly remember when I was still working overseas, when I was working as one of the members from the service people. I was in one of the properties in Muscat. My manager before underscored to us, he emphasized that our service as a staff is very, very important. It plays a paramount importance in the operation. It's not really the facilities, the high-end, the expensive decor, the high-end facilities and amenities, but it's really the service. It's a service of the people working in there. Although we know that there is no such thing as impeccable service, but if the people working in there in the organization, they are very good in whatever they do, even if they commit mistake, then it cannot be noticed by clients, for example. So it's not only the facilities, but it's the it's the work of the people or the members of the staff in the organization. So that's how important human resource management is. Now, we will look into the past views of human resource management and of course the present views. We'll be talking about the past views of human resource management. Back in the dark ages around the mid-1970s, apparently there weren't enough computers available to most managers. Human resource managers, we usually call them personnel managers then, were sometimes selected for the job because they had limited skills as an operational manager. They might have had less experience or been considered a people person rather than a tough boss. In other words, they weren't considered to be as capable of managing what were considered to be real operations. So, they were being placed in HR. Why? Why is this so? In general, human resource management was considered to be a bit easier than any other management jobs. Human resource managers were only expected to be paper pushers who could keep all of the personnel files straight. They maintained organizational records on the people who worked for the company, but had very little to do with the management of the organization's business processes. Since all they had to do was manage paper, we frequently put this with more limited skills in personnel. In this kind of environment, most human resource departments provided limited services to the organization, keeping track of job applicants like maintaining employee paperwork and filing annual performance evaluation. The line managers were the ones responsible for direct managing the people within the organization. From the past, human resource management were considered as cost center and not a revenue center. Okay? Cost center in the sense that they considered as a division or department within the organization that brings in no revenue or profit. That's according to Lucier and Hendon in 2013. Whereas a revenue center is a division that's the exact opposite. So it generates monetary returns for the organization. It enhances profitability of the organization through enhancing the productivity of the people within the organization. So in the present views of human resource management, the said department is now revenue center and productivity centers. So unlike with the past view that it was only considered as cost center. Productivity, let's define what is productivity. Productivity is the amount of output that an organization gets per unit, with human input usually expressed in terms of units of time. It is the end result of two components. On what are these two components? Effectiveness and efficiency. That managers work to create and improve within the organization. The function of getting the job done whenever and however it must be done. It answers the question, did we do the right things? Efficiency is a function of how many organizational resources were used in getting the job done. It answers the question, did we do things right? We're now in the 21st century human resource management challenges. This is according to Lucier et al. So these are the identified challenges in human resource management. Number one is productivity. As we all know, productivity is the amount of output that an organization gets per unit, with human input usually expressed in terms of units of time. So, job satisfaction, a feeling of well-being and acceptance of one's place in the organization. Another challenge is the turnover, permanent loss of workers from the organization, voluntary turnover and involuntary turnover. There are two types of turnover. So for voluntary turnover, under this are people, for example, who did resign, who did give their irrevocable resignation from the job. While for involuntary turnover, this is the case for people who are being fired from their job, who are being terminated from their jobs, or they're being forced to resign from the job. And the last one is absenteeism. Very, very common up to now, even before. Temporary absence of employees from the workplace. We go back to job satisfaction. We all know that there are many research studies that show people who are unsatisfied with their jobs. And human resource management should look into in this kind of issue. Strategy and strategic planning deal with the process of looking at the organization and environment both today and in the expected future, and determining that the organization wants to do to meet the requirements of that expected future. Human resource managers are now actively seeking talent for their organization because good HR managers are constantly looking at processes within the organization, and if there is something going wrong, figuring out how to assist the line management team in fixing the problem, whether it's a training problem, a motivation problem, or any other people-oriented problems. The function of human resource has been redesigned to enhance the other functions of the business. Meaning to say, human resource is now intervening, is now always at working collaboratively with other departments in order to achieve the goals, vision objectives of the company. Why has the human resource been redesigned? This is to make the organization more competitive and create sustainable competitive advantage. That's the key term. Create sustainable competitive advantage. This is the basis for strategic human resource management. To have a sustainable competitive advantage with other organizations. That's the main goals, one of the main goals, of the strategic human resource management. Technical skill is apparently the first set of skill necessary for successful human resource managers because this is the easiest of the four sets to develop. They are defined as the ability to use methods and techniques to perform a task. Being successful as an HR manager requires comprehensive knowledge of laws, rules, and regulations relating to human resource, computer skills, because everything in HR is now computerized, including some equal employment opportunity, reporting requirements, skills in interviewing, training knowledge and skills, understanding of performance appraisal processes, and cultural knowledge. The second major skill set is human relations. Human relations skills are the ability to understand, communicate, and work well with individuals and groups through developing effective relationships. The resources you may need to get the job done are made available through relationships, both inside and outside. Inside here refers to people you work with, employees, your coworkers, your bosses, your supervisors. And outside here refers to the customers or the suppliers, your clients, the guests, and the firm. Organizations are seeking employees with good human relations skills. Why is this so? Yes, because we will really focus on interpersonal skills and that everybody will have an opportunity to develop human relation skills during their tenure in an organization. Human resource managers must have strong people skills. This does not mean that human resource managers have to always be gullible or sympathetic to every sub-story, but it does mean that they have to be empathetic. What is empathy, by the way? Empathy is simply being able to put yourself in another person's place, to understand not only what they are saying, but why they are communicating that information to you. Empathy involves the ability to consider what the individual is feeling while remaining emotionally detached from the situation. So I mentioned empathetic. It's not necessarily, that the human resource manager should always be empathetic. Unlike, for example, as an ordinary staff, member of the staff in the organization, when you, for example, rectify problem or solution, provide solutions, handling complaints, wherein there's a dire need for you as a member of the staff to place yourself in the shoe of the guests. So that's, you have to apologize with empathy. That's another story. Human resource management should have a very good human relation skills that involve also the ability to work well with others in teams, to persuade others, to mediate and resolve conflicts, to gather information from others, and to jointly analyze, negotiate, and come to a collective decision. Finally, human relation skills involve the ability to relate to as well as influence both employees and the executive staff of the organization. Conceptual and design skills are another skill set required in a successful human resource manager, and it is based on decision making. Clearly, the decisions you have made over your lifetime have affected you today. Leadership decisions determine the success or failure of the organization. So organizations are training their people to improve their decision-making skills. This involves the ability to evaluate a situation, identify alternatives, select a reasonable alternative, and make a decision to implement a solution to a problem. And the last skill is the business skill. Lastly, human resource managers must have strong general business skills. Like technical skills, business skills are easier to develop than human relations and conceptual design skills. They are analytical and quantitative skills, including in-depth knowledge of how the business works and its budgeting and strategic planning processes that are necessary for a manager to understand and contribute to the profitability of their organization. Human resource professionals must have knowledge of the organization and its strategies if they are to contribute strategically. This also means that they must have understanding of the financial, technological, and other facets of the industry and the organization. Now, we are now in the human resource management interventions. The topic that I expounded, will definitely usher us to this topic, which is the main concern for my talk this afternoon, the human resource management interventions. I just would like to underscore just 3 identified interventions. And these are the performance management, and there are, of course, lots of information to be discussed under this, like personnel, appraisal, and so on. Managing workforce diversity is another interventions, and the well-being, safety and security, health issues is another intervention. Now let's talk about performance management system. This is under performance management. So there are also 3 key areas in performance management system. So we have the performance management, the performance appraisal, and the reward system. What is performance management? It is a process of identifying, measuring, managing, and developing the performance of the human resources in an organization. That's according to Lucier and Hendon in 2013. It is also the systematic process by which an organization involves its employees as individuals and members of a group in improving organizational effectiveness in the accomplishment of the organization's mission and goals. That's according to Pius in 2010. Organizations that seek to maintain and improve its competitive advantage must be able to manage the behavior of its employees to optimize results. Companies may fail or succeed due to many factors such as the prevailing economic crisis today, which results in low market demand. But it is the ability of the people to perform that can mitigate their losses or take the challenge and convert the crisis into an opportunity for success. Managing people's performance, therefore, is extremely important. Performance management is part of the major systems of organizational control. Organizations must control and direct the efforts of their people towards the achievement of its goals and objectives. It establishes the link between a company's vision, mission, and strategic objectives and the required employee performance. People are the key ingredients for success and growth of a company. Hence, the performance is the central focus of control. Performance management is a systematic process by which an organization involves its employees as individuals and members of a group in improving organizational effectiveness in the accomplishment of the organization's mission and goals. So, in performance management, the manager should ensure that employees and activities outputs are congruent with the organization goals. There are 5 parts of the performance management system. Number 1 is planning, followed by monitoring. 3 is developing. Number 4 is rating. And the last is rewarding. Planning means setting performance expectations and goals for individuals or group of individuals to channel their efforts toward achieving organizational objectives. Getting employees involved in the planning process will help them understand the goals of the organization, what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and how well it should be done. Planning involves establishing elements and standards of the performance appraisal plans. Performance elements and standards should be measurable, understandable, challenging, verifiable, and achievable. Employees are to be held accountable for these agreed plans. Plans should be flexible to respond to some changes in the work environment. These plans are working documents that are to be discussed open rather than just being considered a paperwork filed in a drawer and retrieved only when the performance appraisal comes. In monitoring, by the way, it means consistently measuring performance and providing ongoing feedback to employees on their progress toward reaching their goals. In monitoring, it includes progress reviews with employees, where their performance is compared against plan and standards. Ongoing monitoring provides the advantage of checking how well employees are meeting predetermined standards and to make changes if there are events beyond their control that may impede their meeting the standards. By continually monitoring, an acceptable performance can be identified on time and assistance provided rather than wait for the regular performance appraisal time. In developing, it provides an excellent opportunity to identify training and developmental needs. Through the PMS, employee developmental needs are evaluated and addressed. Skills, abilities, competencies, and behaviors are the drivers of the performance. There could be some changes in the technology infrastructure, direction and objectives, or supervisory problems that affect employee behavior. Providing training and developmental opportunities encourages good performance. Strengthen job-related skills and competencies and help employees keep up with changes in the workplace. Rating summarizes employee performance over a certain period of time. Rating means evaluating employees against standards in the performance plan and assigning a summary rating of record. In rewarding, this recognizes employees for their performance and acknowledges their contributions to the organization's strategic objectives. It can come in many forms, like award and distinction, Achievers Award, and usually a merit increase in pay and other forms of monetary and non-monetary incentives. These five components, they should be working together, supporting each other in order to achieve natural and effective performance management. So remember, these are the five parts of performance management system. The purposes of performance management system are strategic, administrative, and developmental. There should be a link between the employee's activities to the organization's goals. That's why when the manager and his subordinates sit down to work on the performance plan, the first question that should be asked is, what are the strategic goals of the company? And how can the employee support these goals? The source material references are the job description and of course the job analysis. They can look at the key elements of the job and the critical success factors that can support the strategic goals of the company. To be fair, the system must be flexible enough to adjust to some changes when some company goals and strategies change. Strategic is seldom used as a purpose. Organizations use performance management system, particularly the performance appraisal, as the basis for administrative actions such as salary increase, recognition of high achievers, promotion, demotion, discipline, and termination. That is why performance review is universally disliked and avoided. After all, how many people in your organization want to hear that they did not meet the purpose standards? How many managers went to face arguments, diminished morale, and sometimes hostility from their subordinates resulting from performance appraisal process? Thus, if they are not watched closely, managers tend to rate subordinates high or practically at the same level as mostly everyone to avoid creating enmity from them. In developmental, this is another common purpose of performance management. This is to develop people with potential or overcome their shortcomings. Managers often feel uneasy confronting employees with their shortcomings or weaknesses. Maybe it is more politically correct to call it shortcomings rather than weaknesses. The latter word seems to be harsh. Confronting one's shortcomings, although necessary to improve the performance of the employee, sometimes, if not done properly, could strain such subordinate-supervisor relationship. That is why it must be handled properly with a focus on performance improvement rather on the person himself or herself. Feedback mechanism, performance appraisal, would indicate the shortcomings of employees which could be addressed through training and development. For example, with the delaying of the organizations to improve productivity, multi-skilling is introduced whereby employees are given additional responsibilities but do not have the necessary skills and competencies. This could be the cause of the deficiency in their performance. Retraining is therefore organized to meet these new required skills, or a high potential employee is groomed for promotion to a supervisory job. This particular employee is scheduled for training on basic supervision to be able to handle well his future subordinates. Step 1, job analysis. This is logically our first step because if we don't know what his job consists of, how can we possibly evaluate an employee's performance? We should realize that the job must be based on the organizational mission and objectives. the department, and the job itself. In developing standards and measurement methods, if we don't have standards of acceptable behavior and methods to measure performance, how can we assess performance? The common practice is to have a formal performance review with the boss or with a supervisor once or sometimes twice a year using one or more of the measurement forms. The basic requisites of a good performance appraisal. There are 4 requisites of a good performance appraisal, and these are the following. Number 1, clarify purpose of the job, job duties and responsibilities. Define performance goals with measurable outcomes. Number 3, define the priority of each job, responsibility, and goal. And number 4, define performance standards of each goal set. A good performance appraisal system is a product of preparation and planning. Managers feel that the process itself is time-consuming, but once the foundation is in place, time to administer it decreases. Each step of the process must be taken with participation and cooperation of the employee for best results. In clarifying purpose of the job, job duties and responsibilities, the description or process description, whatever you may call it, and job analysis are the best sources of documents to start with. You have to discuss with your subordinate the key areas of the job that could be focused on his daily work activities to get results. For defining performance goals with measurable outcomes, performance goals must be aligned with the organization's goals and strategies. Setting performance goals must pass the SMART test specific and stretching measurable, either quantitative or qualitative, achievable, realistic, and relevant. Time bound in that it is clear at what point they should be achieved. So the acronym. Prioritize its key job responsibility and goals. Basic requisite for a good performance appraisal is defining performance standards for each goal set. While performance elements tell employees what to do, the standards tell how well they have to do it. A performance standard is a management-approved expression of the performance thresholds, requirements, expectations that must be met to be appraised at a particular level of performance. The approaches to measuring performance. There are many approaches, and I suppose some of you are already familiar with these approaches. So number 1 is the comparative approach. It consists of techniques that require the rater to compare the performance of one individual employee against those of others. The techniques are categorized into 3: the ranking, forced distribution, and paired comparison. Ranking. Ranking, it simply requires a manager to rank employees in his department from the highest to the lowest or from the best to the worst. And in forced distribution, employees' performance is ranked in groups. This follows the normal curve in statistics, where the majority of employees are in the middle, while the fewer number are in either side of the extremes. This is usually done by companies at the initial stage of their performance appraisal system to avoid wild fluctuations of ratings, especially on the high side. In paired comparison, otherwise known as pairwise comparison, it generally refers to the process of company entities in pairs to judge which of each pair is preferred or has a greater amount of some quantitative property. In performance rating, it requires manager to compare every employee with every other employee in the work group, giving an employee a score of 1 every time he is considered the highest performer. Once all the pairs have been compared, the manager computes the number of times each employee received the favorable score, counts up to number of points, and this becomes the employee's performance score. The method is criticized to be time-consuming for managers, especially if his span of control is wider and bigger in terms of number of employees reporting to the manager. Criticism of the comparative approach are the following. While the system provides an effective tool to differentiate employee performance and virtually eliminates problems of leniency, central tendency, and strictness in rating, it fails to link to the strategic goals of the firm. Moreover, the subjectivity of the ratings put their reliability and validity in doubt. Finally, employees are less inclined to accept evaluation based on comparative approaches. Instead of being compared to employees in a group, team, or department, they would rather be rated individually on absolute standards of excellent, good, fair, or poor performance. The attribute approach, it starts on the premise that employees have certain traits or attributes believed to be desirable for the organization's success. It identifies and defines such traits as leadership, initiative, maturity, competitiveness, interpersonal skills, creativity, problem solving, communication, and evaluates employees on them. For graphic rating scale, this is under the attribute approach. This is a list of traits that are evaluated by a 5-point or some other number of points scale. The manager considers one employee at a time, circling the number that signifies how much of the trait the individual has. Graphic rating scales can provide the rater with a number of different points or with a continuum along which a rater simply places a check mark. And in mixed standard scale, it was developed to get around some of the problems with graphic rating scale. It defines relevant performance standards, dimensions, and then developed statements representing good average and poor performance among each dimension. These statements are then mixed with the statements from other dimensions on the actual rating instrument. In a scale of 5, poor, adequate, commendable, excellent, distinguished, or of 3, high, medium, low, employees are rated against these attributes. But the downside of this method is in developing and defining these traits, they usually have little congruence between the technique and the company's strategy. Besides, these methods have vague standards that are subject to different interpretations by raters. Rating by different raters are extremely wide and different. It puts a doubt, therefore, on its reliability and validity. A poor rating on a certain attribute like creativity, where the definition is unclear, could provoke arguments between the rater and the ratee. In the behavioral approach, it tries to identify and decline behaviors of employees that employees may exhibit to be effective on the job. There are 5 techniques that managers are required to assess their employees on their effectiveness and their behavior. Number 1 is critical incidents, followed by behaviorally anchored rating scale, then behavioral observation scales, then organizational behavior modification. This is the acronym OBM. Critical incidents, it requires managers to log specific incidents as specific examples of what is effective and ineffective performance of employees. For number 2, the behaviorally anchored rating scale with the acronym BARS, BARS, It is an appraisal method that aims to combine the benefits of narratives, critical incidents, and qualified ratings by anchoring a qualified scale with specific narrative examples of good or poor performance. Bar scale is a method that combines elements of the traditional rating scales and critical incidence method. Behavioral observation scales, or the acronym BOS, it is a variation of the bars. It differs in two ways. First, instead of discarding large numbers of behaviors that exemplify effective or ineffective performance, it uses many of them to more specifically define all the behaviors that are necessary for effective performance. Second, rather than assessing which behavior best reflects an individual's performance, it requires managers to rate the frequency with which the employee has exhibited its behavior during the rating period. These ratings are then averaged to compute an overall performance rating. The major disadvantage of this is it may require more information than managers can remember. It may consist of 80 or more behaviors, and managers must remember how frequently a certain employee exhibited each of these behaviors over quarter, semester, or annual rating period. This is tedious enough for managers to follow and record. For organizational behavior modification, OBM, the term appears to have been first used by Edward Thorndike in 1911. It has since come to refer mainly to techniques for increasing the adaptive behavior through reinforcement and decreasing maladaptive behavior through punishment, with emphasis on the former. It is a formal system of behavioral feedback and reinforcement. It is premised on the behaviorist's view that future behavior is determined by past behavior that have been positively reinforced. This is in accordance with the law of effect. Behaviors that are followed by positive reinforcement are likely to be repeated. Behaviors that are followed by negative consequences are less likely to be repeated. In summary, the behavioral approach can be effective in that it can link corporate strategy to the specific types of behavior needed to implement that strategy. It provides specific feedback to employees about their expected performance. Also, since those using the system are involved in developing the measures, acceptability is high. With some training of the raters, the results are reliable. There has been criticism on the concept of punishment when misused. Extreme punishment can lead to affective, emotional disorders, and the target of the punishment eventually focusing only on avoiding punishment. It is not getting caught rather than improving behavior. The other downside is the behaviors and measures must be constantly monitored and revised to ensure that there is still a connection to the strategy that consumes a lot of time of managers. Then the results approach. In results approach, we have the management by objectives and the MBO and the productivity measurement and evaluation system, which is the promise. It is premised on the assumption that subjective rating can be eliminated from the measurement process and that results are the closest indicator of one's contribution to organizational effectiveness. These are two systems in the results approach. MBO, or management by objective, is a process of agreeing upon objectives within an organization so that management and employees agree to the objectives and understand what they are in the organization. The term, by the way, the term MBO was first popularized by Peter Drucker in his book, The Practice of Management. The essence of MBO is participative goal setting, choosing courses of actions, and decision making. An important part of MBO is the measurement and comparison of the employee's actual performance with the standards set. Ideally, when employees themselves have been involved with the goal setting and the choosing of the course of action to be followed by them, they are more likely to fulfill their responsibilities. The principle of MBO process is to create empowered employees who have the clarity of the roles and responsibilities expected from them, understand their objectives to be achieved, and thus help in the achievement of organizational as well as personal goals.